All right, I'll kick us off. We'll have some more people join in progress as we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Don Saucier. I'm the Faculty Associate Director for our Teaching and Learning Center, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the TLC Professional Development Series event for today. As we do all the time, we're going to start today with a land acknowledgement.
All right, Don, just give me a thumbs up. Okay, all right, here we go.
As the first land grant institution established under the 1862 Morrill Act, we acknowledge that the state of Kansas is, historically, home to many native nations, including the Kaw, Osage, and Pawnee, among others. Furthermore, Kansas is the current home to 4 federally recognized native nations: the Prairie Band Potawatomi, the Kickapoo Tribe of Kansas, the Iowa Tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, and the Sac and Fox Nation of Missouri in Kansas and Nebraska.
Many native nations utilize the western plains of Kansas as their hunting grounds, and others, such as the Delaware, were moved through this region during Indian removal efforts to make way for white settlers. It's important to acknowledge this, since the land that serves as the foundation of this institution was, and still is, stolen land.
We remember these truths because K-State's status as a land-grant institution is a story that exists within ongoing settler colonialism and rests on the dispossession of indigenous peoples and nations from their lands. These truths are often invisible to many. The recognition that K-State's history begins and continues through indigenous contexts is essential.
Please remember
These truths,
because we still remember.
Thank you. Our professional development series meets on Wednesdays noon all throughout the academic year. We also archive our events for later viewing asynchronously. So if you see today's event, you're saying my colleagues need to know about this, and they will. We will put that up on our webpage a little bit later today so that you can check it out and share with your colleagues. You can also get a professional development certificate either as a graduate student or as a faculty or staff member. And we would love you to do that. We're going to drop the information into the chat to help you do that. There's also the possibility, if you're a faculty member, you can become a TLC fellow, which is basically saying you're committed to improving other people's teaching excellence outside of your own. Information is also available at that link that Ashley just dropped into the chat. A couple of other announcements. Our academic innovation office is doing lots of amazing things, and they have a number of events coming from our instructional design team related to accessibility. And those events are posted on the Academic Affairs and Innovation website. We'll also drop that link into the chat. There it is. So you can check those out and go see those. Those are going to be super helpful, especially as we get our classes more accessible in the coming year. Also want to let you know, we're really excited about this. We have our 4th annual SOTO Showcase coming up at the end of the semester. SOTO Showcase is a place where people share their research on teaching and learning, innovative teaching ideas, classroom practices, all that kind of stuff. It will be the Monday of finals week, so Monday, May 12th, from 1:30 to 4:30. We have oral presentations. We got poster presentation. It's going to be awesome. And we have now gone live with our submission portal. So if you want to submit, and it's a pretty painless submission process. If you want to submit, we got a Qualtrics link that you can now hit at that link that Ashley has dropped into the chat. Ashley is channeling all the announcements today. She is doing great. You can hit that and you can submit for that. The deadline for submission is Friday, April 11th. We'll be putting out some reminders not only in this series each week, but we'll put them out over social media, and we'll have a K-State Today announcement this coming Friday. We're about halfway through the semester. We got a bunch of cool stuff coming up next week. Actually, not next week, 2 weeks from now, because next week is spring break and you take some time to yourself. But 2 weeks from now, Fred Burach and Brad Regier from the Office of Assessment are going to talk about opportunities to view student achievement on program outcomes through Power BI. That's going to be awesome. But today is awesome as well. Today we have Dr. Doris Carroll. I'm so excited for this event. Dr. Carroll is going to be talking to us about creating engaging classroom communication for student success. Dr. Carroll, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Saucier, and welcome to my colleagues on the screen. This is an exciting time to talk about classroom communication and classroom events. And Ashley, we might be ready to see that first. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. So what I want to talk about today is how we, and I still put myself in there, creating engaging classroom communication for student success. And this is a broad topic area There are lots of opportunities and lots of ideas, so I welcome your thoughts and your best ideas. Next slide, please. So in the time that we have this afternoon, what I want to do are a couple of things. I want to remind us or introduce us or illustrate some effective learning communication strategies. I also want us to think creatively about what those classroom communication strategies might look like so that we can design creative and respective communication strategies. And then finally, I want us to learn how to best manage what I'm calling classroom incivility that can interfere or disrupt learning in a lot of different ways. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Next slide. Across our campuses, this notion of student success is an institutional goal. We've seen that articulated in short-term plans and long-term plans for how K-State will grow and sustain itself. We as faculty need to figure out what are those engaging and creative classroom communication activities or events. We need to figure that out in a way that will maximize the learning for everyone in there, regardless of the background from which they come into your classroom, and independent of what the classroom looks like, whether or not it's a sit-down face-to-face class, whether or not it is an online synchronous class, or even an asynchronous class. So this program this afternoon will hopefully boost and encourage activity and engaging classroom communication strategies in ways that will give you confidence as faculty and instructors. Thank you. Next slide. I'm going to let you be the ones later when we have a discussion. I'm going to let you be the ones to kind of narrow this definition of student success. But you see three things on the screen that I want you to consider this afternoon. For most of us in an academic department, it may mean a number of things. Simply put, it may mean those scores or grades. Here we are at midterm. It may mean those grades at midterm or the end of semester grades. And for our departments in accounting, it may mean the grade point averages of our students as they walk through or go through our programs, undergraduate and graduate programs. But for the students sitting in my class or those that I see virtually, it has something else. It has a personal meaning for them. So for me as an instructor, it's important to learn what those personal definitions of success are from those students. I have the joy of teaching graduate students, and they are all across the country. And so the personal meaning will vary quite a bit across those adult learners with whom I work. And then finally, the student success has some relevance that we as faculty and instructors must be aware of for measuring those institutional outcomes that are important for colleges, that are measures of our growth and success as well. Okay. So just give yourself permission throughout as we're talking here to kind of just think aloud about what student success means for you. Okay. Next slide. So I've tried my best to nail down a working definition of classroom communication, and it is still very broad. Some of you teach in person. Those may be small seminars. They may be large lecture rooms. Some of you that in person might be in the field outside of a traditional classroom. For others, it is online, and it may take a couple of different forms. It may be a scheduled meeting on a Monday night at 7 o'clock, as I have for one of my graduate courses. It may be asynchronous, meaning I assign my class a reading, and then I have group leaders take charge the next day to kind of facilitate the discussion about the reading assignment. It may be a combination of hybrid, sometimes in person, sometimes virtual. All of those have communication strategies and styles that we just need to give ourselves permission to examine. I have added for my classroom communication, the other thing important, particularly since I teach online, is how I do the email communication and what I say in there and what the student receives and how that promotes their feeling or of success. And then whether or not the counselor in me has to say, we have nonverbal communication that I see virtually, as well as what I see in class. And that communication may have it may feel different, it may look different, but it has some meaning in terms of how that student feels successful. I, as a faculty member, may be teaching online in a synchronous way. I need to be able to see and recognize what the meaning of that nonverbal communication is. It's just as important as the verbal questions or comments that they share. It's not any easier necessarily to manage, but I'm asking you to kind of be aware of that. And for those of you that teach large classes, either online or in person, that recognizing that classroom communication may not be easy on any given day or week. But I'm asking you to just kind of give yourselves a moment to sort of think about these kinds of elements, these structures, in person, online, email, and the nonverbal communication. Now, later on, others may talk about other communication that may come into the classroom that I'm not considering, and that's okay too. Yeah, I'm just introducing these 3 or 4 types of communication for us to talk about this afternoon, okay? Thank you. Next slide. The important piece in this conversation today is for us, and I do put myself in here, to figure out how to create the classroom communication that is engaging and creative. Creative? What the heck does that mean? It can be a lot of things. I live in the College of Education, and so as I walk down the hall and near my office, I see my elementary and secondary classroom faculty preparing classes for those that will be elementary and secondary teachers. And they do a variety of things that I would never have considered. The classroom is decorated. It has special art on it. The lighting may look different than a traditional classroom with tables and chairs and computers, okay? My colleagues, through their class, they are quick to break their groups into small groups where they can create a task in a short period of time during that in-person class, and then they share that with others. If you're working and teaching virtually, I have the opportunity to do that as well. And how I do that may support the creativity of my students that are there. So I just have a couple of bullet points there. I'm just reminding us that it is okay. It's okay for us to break into small groups. I don't have to do a lecture that goes forever with no stop. I can break it up. I can move my class virtually and in person. I can move them into some small groups for a few moments to talk about a topic area or to be creative about examining an issue that is important for my class to learn. That second bullet, change the environmental look of your classroom. I just mentioned what happens sometimes in Bluemont Hall with my elementary and secondary colleagues, secondary education colleagues. For those who don't know, Bluemont Hall has had a major renovation. And one of the things that has been significant about that is, quote, a simple matter. We have more windows than we had 20 years ago, 15 years ago. We have windows. So we have an entryway that is completely open now. And that space is made available for small classes to come in, for students who have projects together to come and talk. And that open space, they can see the front of the building and the side of the building. They can see a different environment than a traditional classroom with no windows and a closed door. All right. The music instruments, the music keynotes you see there. I have had in my class, in my graduate class, I've given an assignment to create a portfolio to talk about your skills. And I've had folks ask me, can I do music? And I've said yes, because I live with a former music teacher and a jazz musician. And so I've had students design a portfolio, but embellish it either with music that they have created. I've had new music projects created. I've had artwork created in some of my online classes. I have had you see that music, poems. Yes, I've had students write poems that reflect the things that they have learned in my class. And I have had spoken word. All of those elements of music that they have used to illustrate the skills that they've learned in the class. The last bullet point, I can't overemphasize. As you're thinking about being creative with creating new things in your class, give yourselves permission just to reach out to your faculty colleagues to ask, what are you doing? How are you doing this? How are you being more creative? And then we all, and I put myself in here, I'm still learning about how best to use artificial intelligence in all of its forms to enhance communication. That one is a process, I think, for all of us to engage in. And we are still learning about the ways we can use AI in our classroom to support student success and student learning. That one is one that we probably will have some more teaching learning center programs around, I hope, in the future. All right, thank you. Let's go forward. Next slide. I need to pause and say this to myself and say this to others and ask you later when we have questions. I will be curious. I have to say to my graduate students in my online classes, this communication here is not social media. I don't want you to engage each other in the way that you might choose to do or you might have done already in some social media platform. And I remind them that I do include a statement sometimes in my course syllabus about the use of social media. Some of that just simply says, I'm not going to be your friend during this class. If you send me a social media request, I'm not going to respond to that because I need to keep those roles, social roles, separate from our teaching roles and responsibilities, okay? I have put at the end of this, if you have questions about the appropriateness or the use of social media, first you can talk with your colleagues in your academic unit, but I think you can also just consult with our Honor and Integrity System office about how they recommend that we do that in a way that respects the academic integrity of our teaching and doesn't get in the way. And so, particularly if you work with students that you know have a social media presence, I would set that up front and say that to them early in your class, whether or not it is in person or whether it is not, whether it's an online or asynchronous or hybrid. I would say that to them early in your course about the parameters of social media communication. That's not what should happen ideally in our typical classrooms, whether they are online or in person or hybrid, okay? Now, I just make an editorial note when I pull this picture. It looks like some computers from a whole generation ago when I was learning and in graduate school. But that's an editorial. I'll leave it alone for the moment. Next slide, please. Okay. Our students come from a wide variety of backgrounds. Particularly in my class, when I teach online, I have had students across all of the time zones in the continental US. I have had veterans and veteran family members that have been outside the US. And so they have been several hours ahead of me. That means they come into the classroom with cultural background and cultural framework. Some days of the week, it may not be important, but most of the time it is, okay? Most of the time, we as faculty and instructors, we really do need to understand the cultural framework around which our students learn in the classroom, because that may help us in promoting and supporting them as they're doing assignments and activities and collaborating with one another. It might involve asking and understanding how those students learn best. It could be in small teams. It could be individual projects or virtual activities. It may be something different than maybe what I did last year when I taught this class. And that would be okay for me to make that change, okay? I just need to recognize as an instructor that my classroom is a cultural space. And I call that cultural environmental space, both in terms of just the structure of the learning environment, but also the voices and the students that are in my class. There are cultural communication distinctiveness. I won't say differences, distinctiveness, okay? And that also involves both verbal and nonverbal communication. Example. Last year, I had a graduate student in one of my classes. He was from Canada. And at the end, as mid-semester, about midterm time like now, I start to inform them about doing a portfolio project that talks about their skills in academic advising, which is the course. The young man came to me and said, I come from a family that is bilingual. My mom teaches French in elementary school. Ours is a bilingual family. His undergraduate work was at a bilingual university in Canada. I said, yes, you can do your portfolio in a second language in French. My K-State undergraduate French is a little raggedy, but I can get some help in translating that. So we worked out a compromise. He wrote his abstract in the beginning of the project. He wrote it in as they would do in some Canadian universities for projects. He wrote it in English, and he also wrote the abstract in French. And the rest of his project was in English. And I thanked him for that. I thanked him for educating me about the fact that it is okay to ask me about that. And he has since graduated, is in that process right now of job hunting. And I met his family at graduation, and they were very grateful. And I learned about the richness of that bilingual family. And it sticks with me now. And that's why I highlight the fact that our classrooms are cultural spaces, okay? And we just need to give ourselves permission to acknowledge that. Maybe I would not have done that a few years ago, asking him about writing in his native language. But it worked, and it was successful for that graduate student, and that was a good thing. Next slide, thank you. Well, in my example of the Canadian student, I sort of highlighted the matter of language communication. But let me illustrate that a little further. it really is of value and important for us to acknowledge the cultural language and pronunciations that describe the cultural groups on our campus and in our communities. I have asked students for proper pronunciations of their surnames. I have stumbled over them on more than one occasion. And when I've done that, I have apologized for my crummy pronunciation, and I practice. Again, so I've done that. I've acknowledged, as you heard from the story from the Canadian young man, it's okay to write in a second language. I need to pay attention to my textbook language in the way if it illustrates some historic colonial language in the text. I need to attend to that and say something to the class regarding that. I tend to be very attentive since I teach in the counseling and education area. I tend to be real attentive to that, the language that is used in some of the textbooks. But sometimes there are things in there that I don't see. And when students bring that to my attention, I really need to help clarify those things in many ways. Why is this language stuff important? Language stuff, that's not good professor language, but okay. I learned a few months ago that K-State is in the process of working over the next few years to possibly become an Hispanic serving institution. And I don't know yet what that means for my academic department and for my college, but it does mean that there will be language communication distinctions and differences, probably. It does mean that as a faculty, I need to understand what that means. And so it may be important for us now to talk about the communication and understand those language differences with those students in our classes. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So I'm offering, this is only a handful of resources that are available to us across our campus. I have just identified 3 or 4 here to offices that I can use as a faculty to strengthen my communication about special populations and language. I mentioned the Morris Family Multicultural Center there. Student groups meet there. I've been there for several different meetings and acknowledgements of cultural events that are going on our campus. Student Access Center. When I first started teaching online, so many 20 plus years ago, I had a blind student in my very first online class. It was a hybrid course. I had to get introduced to the Student Access Center early. I had to learn what resources they have available for my student, but also for me to support my students. Since that time, in recent semesters, I have had at least one student in each of my classes over the last couple of years. And they file a report or a request for special accommodation. And then I get the letter, receive the letter of accommodation from the Student Access Center, informing me what the need for accommodation is, particularly in some of my online classes. That educates me about my need to attend to, are there some differences in how I need to communicate certain information for certain students? And I have called them and asked them a ton of questions over the last couple of years. What else can I do? And I've consulted with some of our experts in helping to navigate and alter things in Canvas. Okay. That one is always available to you. They have been extraordinarily supportive of my students, and I have learned much from them. The Spectrum Center is a center that highlights and celebrates GLBT plus folks. And I see the note in there about their accessibility training, special. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Spectrum Center highlights GLBTQ resources and support and students. And then finally, the International Student Center for the range of students, international students that are coming into our campuses, on campus, and occasionally a handful that are in line. And there are other, these are just a handful of the resources across our campus. Offices, student support offices, but offices that I can call as a faculty member to ask them what I would call a naive question about communication and how best to do that for a special population. And have I called all of these folks? Yes, I have. Over the years, and some other resources around the campus. But these are just a handful, and you may have other contacts across our campuses that you use to enhance, particularly those special population communications with, like, the Student Access Center, or cultural communication matters for some of our other student groups on campus. All right, thank you. Next slide. So I'm just throwing out again some practical suggestions for you again. These are things you probably are doing already. So these are sort of renewing and reminding you of things you're doing already. I've already said that first one. Apologize for classroom communication miscues. If I misspell a name, if I mispronounce it, if I fail to put something up in a timely way, if I send something or post something in my online class, or if I send an email that has some inaccurate information, I need to do that apology. Have I sent notes to students directly? Absolutely, I have. Yes. Why is it important for me to do that apology? And then the note below says, thank you. When I do that with the student, it recognizes their uniqueness. I'm saying I acknowledge I did not mean to hurt you or offend you. And I appreciate you being in my class, and I'm learning. That apology says I made a mistake, I'm learning. The thank you says, I appreciate having you in my class. I appreciate your comment, right? Because I teach so much online, the email communication is part of what I call my classroom communication. I've mentioned it before, but I'm highlighting that again, that it's integral to help the student feel valued. And I'm careful about my language in there, and I'm attentive to just affirming as I end that email with a student. I thank them for being in the class. I attend to that special need or special concern that they had, and I just show my appreciation. And then finally, it's okay to celebrate. It's okay to celebrate that work in some way. And however you do that, whether it's in the class or at the end of the class, or you invite students to say, what did you excel in, or do you have something we need to celebrate? However that communication happens, I'm just affirming that is another part of our classroom communication. It seems these elements you see here seem like they're small. They're not so much about the book chapter or the content. They are about how the student receives it and how the student feels affirmed, and that promotes the success. Okay. And it can go far. I had a student recently, for example, that wanted a graduate student that asked, can I audit your class this summer? And the summer class is very fast paced and there were other things going on and I had to say no. But I wrote that no in an email to him in a way that said, you still want to learn about the content you still want to learn from me and let's find a way to make that happen. Okay. So it wasn't a matter of just saying no and, kind of slapping him in the face. I needed to write a communication that said, your interest in learning this content area is still valuable. Let's talk at another time about how we can do that if it's not in the summer. Does that make sense? All right, let's go forward. Okay, I mentioned all the good stuff, but before we go into questions and things, I need to just introduce us to, I'm not introducing you, you already know about, and I'm calling it for this discussion, incivility. Disrespectful or rude behavior that could be verbal, nonverbal, a combination of both. It can be a simple incident that may happen in a in-person class or in a synchronous meeting. It could be a set of ongoing things. It could be, and I qualify this, the notion that disrespectful or rude behavior by itself may or may not fit under the student code of conduct policy. And again, that's a question and a phone call to another office. When that has happened, I have, and most of the time when I've had that evidence of incivility, it's been in an online class with a posting. However, I need to engage the student in a phone call, hopefully, or a virtual meeting sometimes, or if not, then simply an email that says, I need to visit with you about what you posted. I step back for a minute and talk about something that happened about 10 years ago, and somebody posted some disrespectful comments about working with women. And the students in that small group, learning group online, alerted me, and I went and read the comments. Then I reached out to the student and I said, can we talk? And we talked by phone. And I said, this is not okay. How can we correct that? Because you've been disrespectful to your learning group and they're feeling, and it's shutting down the conversation for that week. Now, the student respectfully did acknowledge and apologize to the group members. He and I talked later about it. And after that event, and he got through the class and he passed the class and he did okay. The students that were in the learning group, I checked with them as they went through the rest of the semester and they were feeling okay. And they got through the class. A year later, that person guilty of what I'm calling incivility sent me a request to serve on his doctoral supervisory committee. And his research was unrelated to the topic, and I said yes. And so out of whatever happened in that exchange, something happened in a way that he felt he could trust me. And he invited me then to participate in his supervisory committee as he was conducting his dissertation research. And I did that, okay? It doesn't always happen like that. I will just say that was a special adult learner who acknowledged the error that he made. Again, when you have those incidents, whether they are in class, in your office, or in an online or synchronous or asynchronous online environment, consult with your peers about how they have navigated through that in your academic unit or department. If you have other questions or concerns, The other office available to you to ask questions is the Office of Student Support and Accountability. In the worst case scenario, if you think it rises to that severe statement of incivility, there is a way for you to file a concern at that office. Okay. Okay, next slide or next opportunity. I've mumbled and jumbled for a few minutes, 40 minutes. It's time for us to have a little short break. And I'm asking us in this breakout session to do one of two things there. Design a couple of one or two creative activities to enhance your own classroom communication. And I'm not going to define what your classroom is. I'm leaving that open to the experts in your breakout session, okay? And I will look to learn from you on the other side. Thank you in advance. Okay, I think we got everybody back. Okay. So, experts, if you had a note taker in there, or if not, just unmute yourself and share a couple of creative ideas or activities.
I'm happy to share out from the group that I was in. We had a lot of really cool examples about increasing kind of creative classroom communication. A number of people talked about using discussion boards and then giving shout outs to the really cool discussion comments on there. Talked about getting permission to do so, to kind of, not embarrass the student, but kind of make them feel empowered to share their responses. Some group work, some kind of collaborations among our students to get them to kind of rely on each other in kind of safe and inclusive ways were some of the things that we talked about.
Oh, perfect. Perfect. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Other creative ideas? One idea I'll accept.
We had spoken about things such as using mastery pathways and being able to interact more with students and understand where they are in their learning and make sure we catch when they need more attention or remediation.
Okay, say more about that. Just add another sentence.
So we were talking about classes where we might be doing programming and gaming theory, and we want to be able to identify what students need more assistance. Maybe they're not as skilled as they need to be at that point, and being able to remediate that and make sure that they don't fall behind or hide away and not speak up.
Okay. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you. I'm putting that gaming theory on my note that I need to learn.
Dr. Carroll, I just want to point out, I'm totally stealing the add another sentence prompt. That was great.
Yes. Okay. All right, let's go forward to the last okay, so you don't have to do this now, but you can. We have a couple of minutes. Suggestions for creative communication. You've heard a couple. And if you have any success stories about creative communication. Now, if you have a success story now, I invite you to share that with us. If not, and you do something in the next few weeks, you may reach out to the Teaching Learning Center staff and share the success story there. Okay? I'm giving Dr. Sathier a little more work to do, but that's okay.
That's all right. I'm giving it right to Ashley and John V, so it's all good.
Perfect. Perfect.
Yeah. One of the things that I'll kind of contribute here too, and this goes really well. I do this in lab meetings, I do this in some of my classes, is I'll often start the day with wins. You mentioned celebrating, but kind of going around and just saying, hey, what's going on that's good right now? And it doesn't have to be huge. Some people will be like, hey, I'm just making it through the week. Some people will be like, it's my birthday. Some people are like, I know someone with a birthday. Like, and then sometimes it's like Ashley got her EDTR all the way through to grad school, right? So it's I think sharing out those wins sometimes is a great way to kind of get you to share with each other in a positive way.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. Yes. And you could say, those of you that have writing assignments and need to get something out to send to a journal, you can tell your graduate students, since I work with graduate students, I finished my edits. And that's a way of modeling the success story for those that may still also have some writing activities or writing projects to do. Yes. Mhm. And we can ask them to talk about if they're going to a professional meeting, if they've traveled and they've seen some things that represent creative communications, if they've been even around the Manhattan campus, because there are a couple of things that are happening in the community that fall into this category of creativity. I think the important thing for all of us as faculty is to give ourselves permission just to keep an open mind about new ways of creating effective and engaging communication in our classes. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. Last slide, please, for contact. I am in the Special Education Counseling and Student Affairs Department. You see my contact information there. I am happy and open to hearing from you. More importantly, I need to keep learning from you, from my faculty colleagues and from students who have success stories to tell about good things that have happened in their classes. Okay. Last words of success. Last words of creative communication. I will say to you, thank you. This conversation about creative and engaging communication doesn't end here. Please take these ideas back to your departments and to your colleagues. Share them with those of you that work with graduate students and who may also be teaching or helping in the lab or working with others and student groups. This creative communication and engaging communication happens in our classrooms, but as I pointed out, it happens elsewhere. So I look forward to learning from you as we go forward around these issues. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carroll. And if the audience would please help me thank Dr. Carroll for the great conversation that we've had today, that would be amazing.
Thank you. Great job.
Couple of announcements as we get done. Number one, we're going to have a post-event survey that you can fill out to tell about this. I'll also remind you we archive this event so your colleagues can watch it later, so please point them to it. In 2 weeks after spring break, we'll have Fred Burock and Brad Regier from the Office of Assessment talking about opportunities to view student achievement on program outcomes through Power BI. Dr. Carroll mentioned AI. The week after that, on April 2nd, Sydney Alexis and Teresa Maricassa will be talking about AI and online writing assignments. So definitely come back. That's a big part of the TLC program this year, next year, and probably for the years to follow. SOTL Showcase, we're accepting calls for that. So please kind of put in for that. If you have questions, let us know. But that's going to be a great event on May 12th. From 1:30 to 4:30 in Hale Library. We'll have awesome talks, awesome posters, and those sorts of things. And I'll also remind you that my academic affairs and innovation colleagues and the instructional design team have a number of accessibility events coming up that you should definitely check out. So lots of things going on. Next week, though, we're not going to be meeting because it's spring break, and I hope you take some time off. If you're like me, you can't take all the time off, but I do hope you take some of that time off to recharge. We call it strategic renewal, so type A high achievers will
Yes.
actually take time off. Taking time off actually makes you more productive when you come back. So take some time off, invest in some self-care, and we'll see you soon. Thank you for being here this afternoon, and have a great rest of your afternoon.